Yeah, so I want to ask a question that you people in the whole of the human slides you have described about that there is still more to do the research work regarding the health effects on the mobile and the radiation itself. So how can we say strongly that there is no any side effect on the radiation of the health on that all issues? Like if you don't have well studies as that regarding the children itself also, then we should have that there may be the effect or there may not be, but we cannot strong.
It's just the way IARC classifies a potential carcinogen. It classifies the science, not whether it is carcinogenic or not. It says that, look, there's this amount of science says that it's possible. If there's much better evidence that it does, then it says it's probable, that's 2A. Or if there's overwhelming evidence that it causes cancer, it's a 1. It says yes, it's a carcinogen. But the 2B is really an unfortunate way to classify the science, because anything is possible. And to say it's possibly carcinogenic, what does that mean? In fact, what IARC means is there's very little chance that it's carcinogenic, and we need more research just to confirm that. Now, you're right that science can't prove that it's not carcinogenic. All it can do is do a lot of studies that say, well, look, the weight of evidence is overwhelming that it doesn't cause cancer. And that's the only way science can operate. That's how health risk assessments are conducted.
So here in India, the Indian Council of Medical Research started a research, on their own to basically study what are the health effects of radiation frequency, from mobile phone and cell phone towers. And what they have to say is that they could not find subjects on whom they can conduct the study, because you could rarely find people who don't use phones. So always you can find loopholes in studies. So all studies which show some positive result, you can find loopholes in them and just negative. So how do you explain that?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. The fact is, you try and conduct a study when a new agent comes out, but if this agent, mobile phone use, comes out so rapidly that there's no one doesn't use a mobile phone, you haven't got a control group. So what you have to do is something different. You say, okay, I want to look at brain cancer. So I'm going to get a lot of people with brain cancer, a lot of people who don't have brain cancer, at least there's a lot of people who don't have brain cancer, and say, how much mobile phone use did each of these groups have?
But then again the same question will come, somebody might exaggerate it, as has happened in the India study.
Exactly. And that's why you need lots of different studies. The animal studies and the cellular studies need to confirm that these fields can actually produce cancer at all, and they haven't been shown to produce it at all. And so the epidemiology studies are not confirmed by all the other studies. There's only a couple of studies that are positive anyway, and we can explain why they're positive. So overall, in the assessment of the health risk, you say there is no established effect.
So I was asking this question some time back also. Besides the carcinogenic studies associated with mobile phone radiation, there were some other studies on the cognitive effects on human beings. Though I think it's not as wide as the carcinogenic effects. What do those show?
It's important that they conduct that sort of study. Brain cancer is not the only effect that people look at. They do look at cognitive effects. Does use of mobile phone change memory? Does it, short, long-term memory? Does it have any other effect on cognition? And there have been many studies now done on humans in laboratories where they learn to do something and then they're exposed with radio frequency fields, and did their memory change? Did sleep patterns change? Or other neurological effects? They find that they don't. When you do sufficient numbers of studies, you find that the effects are not there. And let me give you another example, because especially in Europe, a lot of people say, I get headaches from electromagnetic fields. Whenever I see a base station, I get a headache. And, or some people get nauseous, or some people get rashes from, being what we call hypersensitive to electromagnetic fields. Now, science can check that one out. And what they do is they sit a person down in the laboratory, put a big black felt curtain down, and on the other side of the curtain, put an RF source. All they do is say, tell me when that RF source is on or off. And they can't. They can only guess. They'll be right 50% of the time because they guess.
But not all the effects could be probably made to determined by the person, right? I mean, especially cognitive effects on, say, how fast you react to external stimuli, etc. That may not be, it may not be an immediate effect.
They have had to look at some long-term studies, but by definition, long-term studies are long-term, so it takes some time. But they have looked at over longer terms that you would expect, and from mobile phones. And WHO, when it started the EMF project, said, okay, we're going to have a scientific review. We do this review and say, where do we have gaps in our knowledge to really know whether it affects any of the normal immune, hematological system, other systems of the body, and it identified a number of gaps. We need more studies here, here, here. And it put out a research agenda. And thankfully, the European Union put in 20 million euros, which it put out to researchers in Europe. The UK put in about £15 million of research. The Australian, Canadian, Netherlands, German, all these governments said, okay, we're going to get research that WHO is requiring. Now this is 15 years ago, and the research results have been coming out. And they've come out to the point now that we feel we have enough knowledge that WHO is right in the middle of reviewing all of the literature. And next year, middle of next year, this huge review, and it will be about 1,000 pages, with about 100 pages of references to various documents that have been reviewed, of all the possible effects that have been researched. There will be chapters on each of those effects, and all the literature saying what's good, what studies you can rely on, and what conclusions we can reach. A similar document was produced for power line fields in 2007. That was a 700-page document, which is a scientific database, effectively, of all the research that was conducted, all the useful research. And in that, it had chapters on what conclusions can be reached. If people are worried, what precautionary measures you can take to reduce exposure to people, and what national authorities should be doing to protect their citizens from electromagnetic fields. And every time they say adopt international standards, make sure those standards are complied with a proper compliance program, because it's no use having a standard and then no one makes any measurements, because it's a paper tiger, as we call it. So governments should be empowered to make the standards, comply with the standards, and make sure that the operators and manufacturers and everyone are complying with those standards, if they're really serious about it. And then they should, and it's always there, have information for the general public. Let them know what's going on, that the standards are there, that we're making the measurements and making sure that they're being complied with. That's the logical flow for any good regulation that's going to be good public health policy. And that's what is in WHO documents.
When you talk about all this research, and especially people who are arguing that mobile phones or the mobile phone towers are not creating public health problems, are you taking into account the lifestyle, changes in lifestyle also? Because probably because of the changes in lifestyle, people are more prone to certain public health problems, because certain things which were not carcinogenic, or they were, but they wouldn't create cancer despite being carcinogenic, are creating it more today because of the kind of food habits or other lifestyle problem. So maybe in terms of a combination of all, I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I would, but maybe in terms of combination, this also becomes a factor in that sense. Is there a possibility of that sort?
Health agencies look at potential agents that could cause health effects, and they have a spectrum of studies on different numbers of studies that they do. Early on, when mobile phones came out, people weren't familiar with the technology, and their behaviour changed a bit. They would yell into the phone in a crowd so everyone heard their conversation, or they'd do it in restaurants or in theatres where a performance is going on. People didn't have the courtesies that you would normally have, that you would normally have had with any device that you use. It was a new technology, and gradually people are learning that the mobile phone actually has an amplifier and you don't have to yell into it. But when you look at health effects, we can't find any health effects. You know, scientists want to find health effects. They don't want to do research that comes out with no result. If they get a positive result that's confirmed, you know, there's a Nobel Prize up there. They want to get publications because a lot of journals don't want to publish negative results. So they always find it more difficult to publish their results if they don't find an effect. So scientists, to become known, recognized in the field, want publications in good journals. So scientists want effects, and they will do anything they can to get an effect. But in the end, they have to be honest about their research, conduct it properly, and do the proper analyses and come out with the result that the study shows. Now, there have been some scientists have fudged their results, and these have been recognized. Some of them have been recognized, and these tend to get into the literature, and they tend to be quoted a lot. That's a problem. But good health risk assessment committees will see through those results. But scientists want to publish positive results. Don't think they do it so they can get a negative result. They don't.
Do you think there is even a need for taking precautionary measures against use of mobile phones, cell phone towers, nearness to cell phone towers? Do you really think even that is needed?
You know, it's a personal thing. For a public health agency to say, oh, we'll take some precautionary measures, but on what basis? You take precautionary measures on there being significant uncertainty about something. But there's not significant uncertainty about this, because there is $300 million worth of research, 6,000 papers have been published on this. We know a huge amount. So there's not uncertainty.
When the WHO says that you can use text messages, hands-free.
Yes. Okay, that's why I say it's a personal thing. A public health authority shouldn't be saying we will use a precautionary measures. You say, if someone's worried about this, and that's exactly what they say in the WHO fact sheet. If you're worried about a mobile phone, okay, you can reduce your exposure, and that's the only way that you should have precautionary measures. They're measures that will reduce a person's exposure, not by reducing the standards, because India's reduced the standards, but the exposures are the same.
As a scientist, do you really think there is a way, a foolproof study which can be conducted on health effect of mobile phone in the near future, maybe 10 years, 20 years, which is foolproof, which cannot be questioned, and should we wait till that long to have some guidelines on that?
I think it is too much early to say that there is no any health effect.
No, but what is your...
I mean,
Is
you're
it really
right. You're
possible?
right, because mobile technology has only been around for about 20 years, and there's only a few people who have been using it for 15 or more years. So you can only do studies up to that point. The big problem is, how do you find out how much mobile phone use was 20 years from now, or you used it 20 years ago?
So that's what, I mean, is it really possible to have a foolproof study in the next 10, 20 years, and should we wait for that long before we come up with a guideline on that?
Remember, the guideline already have massive safety factors incorporated.
But many people are questioning it. You are saying that it's a bogus or, first report, but many people are still questioning it.
There is some cases in the court also that has been said that we have the mobile tower in a house and that's why children have the...
And also when we talk about international guidelines, the usage of mobile phone or the, following of the standard guidelines in India is completely different from what it may be in US or UK or Germany. So does that make a difference?
It shouldn't be. Well, I mean, each government is independent and they can do what they want. They don't have to adopt international standards. I'm just saying it would be a logical conclusion of the science that you base it on international standards, because the standard, let me just, I know this is a bit technical, but let me say how standards are developed. You find out what is the most sensitive health effect that can occur, and we find out it occurs at levels of exposure above what's called an SAR of 4 watt per kilogram. Now, ICNIRP has reduced that for general public exposure by a factor of 50. So it says that people should not be exposed to more than 0.08 watt per kilogram, 50 times below. Now, base stations are another 1,000 times below the international standards. So base station exposure is 50,000 times below the first level at which you get any adverse effect. How much safety do you want? That's the international standard. Not only that, there's another thing. The international standards are based on maximum absorption of that RF field, which doesn't occur. Maximum, just as a small physics exercise, I mentioned at the start of the presentation that a radio frequency field is a combination of an electric field and a magnetic field propagated as a wave. Now, the electric field is the one that is absorbed most in the body. Now, if you have the electric field vector parallel to the long axis of the body, that's when the maximum exposure occurs. Now, in fact, the wave is truly around, and the absorption falls off rapidly with that wave moving around. In fact, less than 1% of the time is maximum exposure occurring. So, ICNIRP assumes that we're exposed to the maximum all the time. And if we say that might occur 1% of the time, then that incorporates another safety factor of 100. So the ICNIRP safety factor is not 50, it's 5,000.